Ladies and gentlemen, once again we are gathered to demonstrate the genuine aspirations of the Iranian people, who are denied their true voice by a new fascist regime. The Iranian regime's election masquerade ended in a ludicrous result. The man who has come out as this regime's next president is known to the world as the man who was proud to say that he had duped the West in the nuclear negotiations and brought many years for the regime to actually escape punishment. His British interlocutor was Jack Straw, who I feel was a defender of appeasement towards an evil regime. He was also very upset that the NCRI exposed the mullah's secret nuclear sites in Natanz and Iraq. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, we want to send a strong message to Khomeini that the international community will not be duped again. The era of your deception has expired. I want us to say that we recognise the NCRI as the only democratic replacement for the mullah's regime, and we will make governments across the world recognise and respect that reality. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to end with these words. Just across the way, there is a display of photographs of martyrs from Camp Ashraf and from Camp Liberty. Shame on the world for remaining silent when they could have done something to save those lives. So on behalf of the British parliamentarians gathered here today, we will stand shoulder to shoulder with you until we get peace and justice for the Iranian people.
Ms. Rajavi, dear friends, I'm proud to be here to tell you about Canada's actions in defense of freedom and democracy in Iran. I'm also here to tell you how we are standing up for the democratic rights of the PMOI MEK. Canada's parliamentarians have worked hard to draw international attention to the appalling conditions in Camp Ashraf and Camp Liberty. We've called on the government of Iraq to respect the rights of the people in the two camps, and I'm proud that my government has delisted the PMOI as a terrorist organization. Sadly, the intransigence of the Iranian regime has required more sanctions by Canada. The steady decline in Canada's bilateral relations with Iran is the direct result of the reckless and brutal actions of the regime. The Government of Canada has continued to take strong actions against the regime and its elite by adopting and expanding its economic sanctions 4 times since 2010, reflecting Canada's view that the regime is the greatest threat to international peace and security in the world today. That is why on September 7th last year, Canada suspended diplomatic relations with Iran by closing its embassy in Tehran and expelling all Iranian diplomats from Canada. And most recently, on May 29th of this year, Canada imposed a further round of sanctions, including a complete ban on imports and exports to and from Iran. However, Canada has not and will never break off relations with the courageous and creative people who are the daily victims of the brutal Iranian regime. As Canadian parliamentarians, We remain deeply concerned about the situation of the PMOI in Iraq, and we call upon the Iraqi government to defend and uphold the international human rights of the Iranian refugee community still remaining in Iraq. As Canada's Prime Minister said just 9 days ago while speaking in the British Parliament, Iran is a profoundly malevolent regime that threatens us all and whose first victims are the Iranian people. Canada will continue to urge the international community to show steadfast resolve on Iran in the days ahead. Thank you. Merci.
Salam ba liberty. Salam ba Ashraf. Salam ba Shoma. Salam ba Madame Iran. Salam ba Azadi. On behalf of the Australian supporters of democracy in Iran, I can report to you that when the clerical dictators attacked the People's Mujahideen at Camp Liberty on June 15, members of the Australian Parliament from all parties called on the Government of Australia and on the United Nations to double their efforts to fulfil their obligations to provide protection to these democratic activists. We call for the immediate return of the people at liberty to Camp Ashraf. I can report that on June 20, the Australian Senate unanimously carried a resolution to this effect with special criticism of the Iraqi government of Nouri al-Maliki. This is an important step forward for the Australian Senate, an expression of the sustained campaign by supporters of the PMOI and NCRI in Australia. The Australian supporters of democracy in Iran, the Search Foundation, of which I'm a member, and the Sydney Peace and Justice Coalition condemn the brutal human rights violations going on continuously in Iran. We strongly support the program of the National Council of Resistance of Iran and its President-elect, Mrs. Maryam Rajavi, for a people's democratic uprising in Iran and against any military attack on Iran and against any further appeasement of the dictatorship. Salam ba Azadi.